So you open up your DAW of choice and bam, you're confronted with the Blank DAW. Ooh. It honestly can be really confronting, but it doesn't have to be. Today we're gonna learn 9 different ways to start a song. Let's go. So the first one is structure first, and this one actually makes a lot of sense because the structure is going to be there in the end anyway, so why not just start with it and then we can fit all the other elements around it. So in this case, if you know me, you know I like house music, so structure of house music is as you'd expect, your 4 to the floor kick drum, claps on every second kick drum, open hi-hat over here, so I can just drag this over, consolidate this, I'm going to loop these, and loop them over, and then maybe like boost the tempo as well. That's your classic house structure. And why this is beneficial is because if I go into 16th notes, it actually shows you all of the gaps that don't have structural spots on them. It sort of details which are the strong beats, which are the sort of weaker beats. For me, it feels like this makes sense because now I can make a MIDI clip, something like this, and go grab a snare drum, and I know that if I put a snare drum here, then it's going to be syncopated. I know that I can swing that snare drum there, and now I can start to add syncopation in between the structure, and this is really important for house music. So maybe something like this. So starting with the structure first is probably the way that makes most sense, especially if you're a beginner. So I'd highly recommend this if you're just starting out learning a new genre. Just try and figure out what that structure is and then start to detail your beat using your structure as a guide and also using the gaps around that as an indication of where you can put things as well. By the way, if you're just getting into music production, house is a really good place to start. We actually have a free house starter kit linked in the description below. So if you're interested, links down there, you can grab it if you want. So if you're feeling a bit more creatively experimental and you want to start with a synth first, that's a really good way of starting as well. I have a little template saved in here that I just double clicked, and this has pulled up my wavetable sound design. And what this is a track with a synth on it. And if I hit record and start playing notes and start messing around with my wavetable sound design, all of the audio is going to be recorded, but the MIDI is not, which is really handy for starting a song because you can start sampling little good parts in here that you really like, and then you can build a song based on the interesting parts that you've more or less just stumbled across within your sound design session. So to set this up, it's pretty easy. I'm just going to get a MIDI track and an audio track, and I'm going to go and actually grab an instrument and drag it onto your MIDI track. This is a really important point because now we can go into the audio track and get the input from this MIDI track here. So I'm getting the input, the audio coming into this audio track from here. And then I'm also going to go input monitoring, and then you can keep this one off. So when I play a note, I can actually hear the audio coming from this track and it's getting recorded over here. So again, I can hit record, and it's just going to record that audio without recording the MIDI. Another fun one is starting rhythm first, and this is kind of best for rhythm-focused genres, kind of like house and techno. And what I like to do is start with 3 rhythmic elements. 1 main rhythmic element, which is my kick drum. My kick drum's going to be kind of keeping time. So if you're in a breakbeat genre, you can maybe have a kick and a snare. And then I'm going to start programming my bass line, and I've got this 1 chord here as well, and I'm going to be placing the chord in. So we're going to be starting by generating a nice groove to build our track around. Something like this. Loop this over and maybe put this down an octave so it's nice and low. Now I've got this chord here, and we can just mess around with the placement of this. Oh, that's kind of nice. So maybe just delaying this by a 16th note here. And then I'm thinking maybe another spot over here somewhere, something like this. And maybe I'll just warp this out so it's all stretched over here and just see how this goes. I'm going to choose a different warp algorithm as well. A little bit of reverb, and we've got this. I think it sounds pretty cool. If you're feeling inclined to write chord progressions, and this is a good way of starting your song as well, I've just got an electric preset loaded up here. I'm going to grab a MIDI clip. I'm actually just going to make sure this headphone icon is on there. And then when I play some notes, I can actually hit the right arrow and draw in some notes like this. If we want a bit more guidance, we can go into our scale and choose something. So like C minor, and maybe I can just fix these notes. This is a lot of fun because we can just experiment around in here. Chord progression is a really cool way to start because it's really easy to make bass lines and stuff around it. I can do the classic trick of just taking off all the top notes and leaving the low ones. And then I can use this as like a guide to start generating my bass line and to start putting in my structure, my skeleton, and my drums around everything as well. For instance, if I wanted to make this kind of like an offbeat bass line, then I could do that pretty easily following the actual notes here. A really fun thing that I find myself doing all the time is by starting by just manipulating drum breaks. For instance, I've got a few different drum breaks. I got this one. And we can just mess around with these things and see what results we can do. So I have a full video that explains this much more in depth, but we can drag things around and sort of extend boundaries. Something like this. We can put loops together. We can process these things in really funky ways. Not to mention all the fun things you can do by sampling drum loops into MIDI tracks and then slicing them up. So there's a lot of fun to be had by simply starting with a drum loop, chopping it up, and then building your track around that. So another great way of doing things is simply going to a track that you like, purchasing it, downloading it, and just dragging it into your DAW. You can do it very easily in Ableton. And then we have this track as a reference, and we can start mapping things out if we want to work that way. So now I can like scroll through and listen to it. And I'm like, okay, he's got a drop here. Yep. We can start to pick up details on what techniques they're using, what kind of sound design they're doing, what kind of transitions they're doing. There's so much information that you can actually get from dragging in a track into your DAW and just analyze the waveform itself and start to build a track around the inspiration that you get from doing this. So a really cool thing that a lot of people forget that you can do is actually go into your browser in here and add a folder. If you click add folder, you can then locate to the folder in which you save all of your Ableton projects. I've already got mine saved right here, and now I can actually explore my projects. Perhaps there's a whole bunch of them that you haven't completely finished, but you sort of just started on, and you can actually go into your project, go into the ALS file, and you can just drag out drums. I can just drag the whole drums group into this project and start listening to that and say, okay, let's have a listen to this. So that's a pretty cool drum beat. Maybe I can just turn this back into a loop. Then what you could even do from here is go to a different track and grab the bass line, for example, from something else, or some tracks from something else. Start mixing and matching multiple ideas together to create something new. So let's have a listen to this. Maybe get the chords from this track as well. Funnily enough, I've created some really cool ideas from this method, so definitely worth trying out. Starting with just picking out a whole bunch of samples to work with is a really cool idea as well. So I've got this Lego Welt sample pack. Just choose a whole bunch of samples, just scroll through these things. There's a nice bass sample. That's a cool pad there. The Lego Welt samples are all labeled really nicely, so you can make sure you can get some chords, some drums, some pads, some synths, some effects. And then once you have all of these sounds, just try and put them together in an interesting way. You don't have to use all of them. Doing this is a really inspiring technique for me. It's kind of just like throwing everything at the wall, seeing what sticks. I really like working with audio, so this technique is a lot of fun. For our last technique, we're going to be taking a little trip over to Samplet.io. This is just a website that spits out a whole bunch of really cool samples that you can randomize. So I just hit this randomize button and it just gives me a random song from YouTube. And you can also like filter these things as well by genre and style. A cool one that you can do is sort of like funk. Maybe I could look for some funk samples. It also keeps track of all your history here. So, oh, we got a James Brown track. Oh yeah.
Get up, get on up, get up, get on up, stay on.
That's genuinely been sampled so many times. So it just goes to show that it actually does work. So that's it. That's the 9 techniques to start your song. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. If you've enjoyed this video, you might even enjoy this video right there, the one that's just being suggested right there. So you might want to click it. Otherwise, stay safe and I'll see you in the next one.